Previously on Sinister Inclinations.
Good evening and welcome to Sinister Inclinations. My name is James Saito. To my right is Terry Sherwood.
Yes, Terry Sherwood, our third show.
Our third show. Very good. Our guest this evening is Keith Kollee. Now, Keith programs the film room for the Calgary Comic and Entertainment Expo. He's been an avid fan of horror and horror films for 30 years, and he's acted in several independent horror productions.
Yeah.
Good to have you on board.
Thank you for having me, guys. I'm excited to be here.
Good. So at least somebody is. So, tell me what specifically you do for the Comic Expo.
Well, we've got the film room there, and so over the course of the weekend, we show as many films as we can. One of the spearheads that I brought into the position when I came into it was I wanted to keep those films as local as possible. So local to Calgary or Alberta or even Canada. I've gone a little bit further afield on that, but I try to keep them as local as we can to try and give those filmmakers a place to have their stuff seen, right? To give them that voice, to give them that platform to stand on, which they may not get in a lot of other places.
Do you get good crowds?
Yeah, pretty decent ones. I mean, depending on some of the stuff, right? There was some stuff in this last year that was actually a repeat from the previous year that didn't quite get as many crowds as we would have liked. But some of the bigger stuff got some really good crowds.
Good.
Yeah.
It's good to see local filmmakers. And
Well, yeah, but local film producers appreciate that.
Yeah, well-
that I can tell you.
Well, I like giving them a platform to stand on.
Good. Yeah, Terry and I do talks at the expo, as you know.
Yeah.
We're hoping that we can shoot an episode of Sinister Inclinations live from the expo. So
Yeah, well, I'll float it, man.
yeah, it'll open up a whole new set of problems. Hopefully, leave a live audience.
Yeah.
yes,
Because I think we did that. It was last year, wasn't it? When we did that in front of the live audience, and it takes on a whole new vibe instead of the 10,000 that we have out here in the dark right now that I can't see.
Yes.
And they're very quiet. But thank you very much.
Appreciative, though.
And,
of
yes,
that.
yeah.
what we basically did last year was we said, we're here to talk horror. What are your folks' opinions on the current state of horror? And for the first few minutes, there was one girl, though, who put up her hand all the time, and she got everybody involved. Because once you get an opinion out there, there's going to be the guy that says, hey, no, that's not
I
right.
would agree with that.
Yeah, and then it just starts. So we're not really, we're facilitators more than we are, hosts as such.
Yeah.
And it became very lively. I think the first time we did it, we were walking up to the room together, and we went, is that the room? Because there was this huge lineup, and it's like, that's for us? No pressure, no
I
pressure.
thought it was a bathroom, actually. That's good.
So do you have any horror guests that you can tell us about right now? Or?
You know what, man? I am sworn to secrecy where it comes to the expo. Any information I do have, I got to keep to myself for the time being.
Okay, well, I guess those who are going to attend the Calgary Comic and Entertainment Expo this year, just look at the website, and there's announcements all the time.
Yeah, follow them on Facebook, follow them on Twitter, any of that. That's where you'll get the first updates on any new guests that are being announced.
If we could get a brief hint about it, will there be a horror guest?
You know what? I honestly don't know. I honestly don't know. A lot of times the guest bookings don't come until a lot closer to the time because a lot of these people have very, very busy schedules, right? And it's tough for them to know that far in advance whether or not they're going to be able to attend. So I honestly don't know. I think that they are pursuing a couple as far as I know, but I haven't heard anything about whether or not they've accepted.
That's fair.
That's fair, yeah. Last year, I think I really wanted to meet Christopher Lambert. And, do a little Highlander, get him to autograph a Highlander picture for me, because that is one of my favorite movies. But he had to cancel, and I know that happens because of actor schedules and things like that. So, yeah. So you've been involved in independent horror yourself, filming.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, I've done a couple of things here in town. I was in a small independent horror film called Bark, written and directed by Ryan Irving. That as the last update has instructed me that it will be coming out this year. I don't know when. I'm hoping that we can maybe get that into the screening room in the expo this year. And I also act on a local web series, a horror web series called The Reapers.
The Reapers.
Yeah, which is written and directed by Mike Anthony.
I met Mike Anthony.
Yeah. I get to play the big bad in that series.
Really kind of the Randall Flagg kind of character.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah. I get to kill a lot of people.
Oh well, that's always entertaining. That's great.
Yeah, it's fun.
Yeah. Well, I'll be in we'll be in contact with you regarding, doing a live thing at the expo, and I hope so. And finding out if we can actually film if we had one of the guests come and say hello and that kind of, the legalities and that sort of thing.
Sure.
So hopefully we can work all of that out.
Yeah.
Good. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So we do have a question.
Ooh, who's it from?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Ooh.
Ooh.
There have been many depictions of vampires and werewolves on film. What are your favorite and least favorite vampire and werewolf films, and why? And that's from Tony in Edmonton. We won't hold it against you, Tony.
Well, we will a little. Let's be fair.
If it does, it'll be cold.
Ooh, that's a good one.
Yeah. Vampire films. What do you got?
Vampire films. There's so many. If I got to pick one right off the top of my hat, I am going to say Brides of Dracula, the Hammer picture, which was the sequel to Dracula, Prince of Darkness. Actually, no, that was wrong. I can correct myself. It was made in between Dracula, Prince of Darkness, and it actually didn't really have Christopher Lee in it, because apparently at the time, Hammer could only afford Peter Cushing, play the Van Helsing part.
Yeah.
And very excellent Baron Meinster, who was quite an excellent vampire. It was more of the effect of vampirism on the countryside. In this case, it was a girls' school, and the effect of the victims. It's quite an atmospheric, very gothic. It was one of the strongest opening scenes with a lake that I have seen, with the fog, the lake, the sinister narration. All in all, quite a good picture.
Okay. Let's add to this as well, just because it occurred to me. Your favorite depiction of the vampire and werewolf, and least as well.
Okay. Well, one of my favorite vampire films is Catherine Bigelow's Near Dark. Big fan of that film. It's super stylish and dark. And I mean, when you start to get together, guys like Adrian Pasdar in there, but you got the late great Bill Paxton, Jeanette Goldstein, Lance Henriksen. You get that trio back together again. I mean, Lance Henriksen is pretty much an icon in the horror genre. It's pretty tough for him to do anything wrong, and he certainly doesn't in this movie. My only complaint with that movie is the ending. I don't like the ending. I think it's a little too happy. It's a little too everything wrapped up with a tidy little bow, and I'm not sure that's always the best kind of ending for horror. I think that horror is best left a little darker and maybe a little open-ended.
It's interesting that you brought that up about the ending. Do you think, just your opinion on this, do you think it was a tacked-on studio ending?
It certainly feels like it, doesn't it?
Right.
Like just all of a sudden this whole blood transfusion thing kind of comes out of nowhere, and and everybody's good and happy. And I mean, I've never seen any interviews with Catherine Bigelow on this particular subject, so I don't know. But I certainly do think that I agree with your inclination there. That I do think that somebody else kind of stuck their finger into that and said, "Nah, we don't like the way this is going." Whether they filmed another ending before or not, or whether they just saw it and said, "Hey, we see where you're going with this, and I don't know if we like it. Let's flip this right kind of at the end here." I agree. Yeah, I do think that that's entirely likely.
They did sequels too, didn't they? Isn't there a 2 and a 3 or something?
Not that I'm aware of.
It doesn't ring a bell. However, the name Quasimodo rings a bell.
Yes, it does.
Sorry.
Get your back into it.
Are you thinking of From Dusk Till Dawns?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah?
Okay. It's probably, I don't know if they did a sequel. I thought there was a Near Dark too.
Yeah, there was. Yeah, from Dusk Till Dawn, there was about 3, and then a very superior television series recently.
Yeah.
Yes. The worst vampire?
Yeah.
Worst vampire. I'm going to go with Gary Oldman in Francis Ford Coppola's Dracula.
Wow.
Simply because in Stoker's book, I'll say this in one line, Stoker's book says he's dressed entirely in black and an old man, and we get this bouffant, red, very Asian look to Dracula then, to the Count then. The idea of that, though, which I can understand, was that it was supposed to be very tongue-like. When they did the overhead shots, you could see very tongue-like,
Yep.
very animalistic. But I didn't like the production design on it, and I thought that the picture fell apart the moment they opened the door.
Fair enough.
Funny.
I felt like it fell apart long before that with the first appearances of Winona Ryder and Keanu Reeves. Both of them were terrible. I thought that Oldman's performance was good. I agree with you on the production design. I don't think it was always appropriate, but I thought his performance was good.
I think too it was good to hear the Romanian language spoken in the picture. I think it does suffer from a production design of a person that's in love with the process of filmmaking. So you have him wearing the top hat, the sunglasses, and doing the old film camera thing. I think there was a sequence of that. I know you're trying to show the passage of time, and you're trying to show that this is 1897 and the world is progressing in these technical aspects. But the other part of it, and you said it fell apart before, there was one scene that they've never done in any vampire picture that they did in this particular one. That was with the blue lights in the coach driver.
Yeah.
You know, and the blue lights that marked the pot of gold that was in Stoker's book. And I've never seen that done until they did it in this picture. And I thought, this is going to be good. And then he opened the door. Things went,
And then everything
for me,
was like this.
just for me.
I think that the portrayal or the performance of a vampire in films, good or bad, as we're discussing right now, comes down to your version of a vampire. What kind of vampire you like, right? Because I mean, if you like the bestial, animalistic kind of vampire, then something like 30 Days of Night is really going to appeal to you, right?
That was going to be what I mentioned. I was going to mention that one as one of my favorites, simply because the Teutonic vampires were as scary as fuck.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I wouldn't want to meet one. You know, they're horrifying.
But if you like your slick, slick kind of stylistic, more glorified kind of vampire, then something like maybe Anne Rice's Interview with the Vampire is going to appeal to you a little bit more.
Either that or Tom Holland's Fright Night.
Yeah.
Chris Sarandon's character, who's
That's
very...
right.
See, I always thought the vampire would be a very sexy, charismatic, suave creature who, you know, literally attracts females to him.
That's right.
One of the aspects about when we were just discussing back here is I've always thought there are 3 types of vampires that exist if you're discussing about good and bad. There's the cinema vampire, the literature vampire, and the actual gothic vampire, the ones that walk around, live the lifestyle,
Right.
and everything. So
Yeah.
if you're looking at that aspect, the literature vampire is different from the film vampire.
Well, early literature,
Yeah, yeah.
because I think now the two have kind of melded.
Yeah, well, now the literature apes the cinema, and the cinema apes the literature, right?
If you read the novel that John Carpenter's Vampires was based on, it's very Hollywood vampire, and I hate to say it, not very well written, and deviates greatly from the film that you finally see, because I think the film that the dude wrote wouldn't translate well to the screen.
Right.
It's one of those things. So Carpenter did a really good job. That's one of my favorite vampire films.
See, but I would argue that while that movie is a ton of fun, and I really enjoyed it, I don't know that the portrayals of the vampires in it are particularly interesting.
No. Yeah, they were very bestial and just...
Well, and kind of flat, kind of cardboardish, right? I mean, even Valak, is it?
Yeah, Valak.
Valak is kind of two-dimensional stock bad guy. Do you know what I mean? And while the actor who plays him does an adequate job of that, there's nothing really that sets Vanek apart from any other big vampire baddie in the vampire cinematic universe. You know?
Oh, that's true. I think my fondness for it comes from James Wood's portrayal.
Yeah.
And his interplay with the priest and that kind of thing. It's comedic value in that regard.
It's tough not to like James Woods.
Well, yeah, it's tough.
He's tough. I didn't mention Christopher Lee either.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well,
I know we were picking two extremes there from my point of view. Lee has made it an icon of himself of that.
Absolutely.
That role. For some people, now it's old hat. If you were not part of this sort of Hammer thing that they did, then it's considered passé. You are into like the 30 Days of Night, the killing machines.
Yeah.
Basically killing machines without character.
Yeah.
One of my favorites that I've enjoyed was a foreign vampire film called Sundown, 1989.
That's not the Anthony Hickox one?
The Vampire in Retreat, 1989. Sundown, The Vampire in Retreat.
Yeah. The Anthony
Yes.
Hickox one. Yeah,
Yes.
it's a great film.
Yep.
I like that one a lot. Bruce Campbell.
Yeah, very good film.
Yeah.
So, that to me, that's one of my favorites. If I'm going to sit down and watch a movie about vampires, without going back to the Hammers and that kind of thing, something that was more recent, that would be, one of my choices.
Also,
Totally agree.
Also, too, you find there's a Mexican film called El Vampiro. I think I gave you the DVD on it. It's the Mexican collection. There are two. And it was in 1957 as well. It is the only time in 1957 horror that I've seen a child threatened in that kind of period.
Yeah.
I think. And it's the only time, again in 1957, this was, I think it was just before Horror of Dracula came out, that you see a vampire with long canines.
Oh, okay.
If you get a chance to see it, viewers get a chance to see it. It's called El Vampiro. It's 1957, it's Mexican, so you'll have to, if you are not Spanish inclined, you can get to look at its subtitles.
Mhm. Yeah.
Just an interesting pic, and it's black and white.
Oh, okay.
Black and white.
That makes me think of the story of the Mexican Dracula as well. It was made at the same time as the classic Dracula that we all know and love.
Yes.
And is supposedly superior to it, though I've never seen that version.
It is. It is tremendously superior. If you could get by instead of Jonathan becomes Juan. Because they were.
Well, sure.
It's true. They were kind of like Juan, and if you get a chance to see it, the Medford, I think it's Jordan Medford who directed it or did the cinematography. It's far superior to what was produced by the Universal main unit.
Yeah.
It's a wonderful, wonderful film. A little stylized in acting, but
That was the time.
it's the time.
That was the time. You either have to accept that or leave it alone.
One of the things too, I had watched a recent special called "The Golden Age of Horror Pictures," and it was on a streaming service, which I'm sure people can find it. And it said, "We talk about vampires, but there is one that is the salient point, one that is the locus point, and that's Lugosi. One. That is where it all comes from. When people view that picture, they go, yes, it's stylized, yes, and, you know, the story is a stage play. Basically, Browning locked the camera and let them walk around like a stage play, everything. But it's him, Lugosi, his voice inflections, his movement that created the whole thing.
Yeah.
If you look at it, think, this is where it comes from. Contrary to you Anne Rice people. And vampires that get all crystalline glow.
Wait, that's not a thing.
Yes, we won't get into that.
We won't even mention Interview with a Vampire or the Twilight film.
That's
Sorry.
a whole other show. Man.
Yeah, gee, I can see the emails coming off now. Yeah, it's not worth discussion.
Yeah.
This is a serious program.
Indeed, yeah.
Well, I'm not going to say. I'll keep my mouth shut about that. So,
Do you think that based on that idea, then it makes me think that maybe some of these the counter vampire stuff, like the 30 Days of Night that we talked about and stuff like that. Do you think that there's a possibility that stuff kind of rose from Nosferatu instead, whereas the other stuff rose from Dracula?
they came from, I think, there's a lot of Hammer film in 30 Days of Night. A lot of the bloodletting and everything, which began in that.
Sure.
And Fearless Vampire Killers, Roman Polanski's giant horror comedy with Birdie Mayne as a what a wonderful vampire figure, you know, and the Jewish guy, the Jewish guy who's actually a vampire that holds up a coffin with a cross on it, and then surfs down a hill on it you know, to get away.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
snowboards down the hill on it, you know, because it's not a Star of David.
I gotta admit, I got about,
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe 2/3 of the way through that film and had to turn it off. I could not stand it.
Well, if you watch it for what it is.
I couldn't. It was too silly for my personal tastes. But speaking of that vein, then one of the ones I've see what I did there. One of the more modern films that I've really enjoyed in terms of a horror comedy with vampires is What We Do in the Shadows.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was really, really funny. Done by the Jermaine Clement from the Flight of the Conchords.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very amusing.
Yeah, very funny film. I really got a kick out of that. But I mean, yeah, we're getting into horror comedies now. We're getting into a whole nother field. Maybe that's too big to get into.
Well, in a prior episode, Terry doesn't really think there's many comedy horror films.
No, I actually corrected myself on that. I said there aren't too many. The genre came and went with Abbott and Costello, Frankenstein.
Yeah.
But I forgot to take into account, silly me, Shaun of the Dead.
Mm-hmm.
Which still, the scene with the LP records, you know, still,
Innovative.
yeah.
Oh,
Still,
very
don't
good
use
film.
that.
That film's great.
It's a copy. Wonderful film.
All right,
Was there
so
a two-part question on this? Wasn't it supposed to be on werewolves too?
Yeah, we're supposed to come back. to
welcome.
werewolves.
Well, let's finish the vampires
Let's
first.
finish vampires because there's one big vampire film that neither one of you have brought up, and I haven't either. And I'm interested to know what you guys think of that, and that's The Lost Boys.
Oh yes.
Yes. Well, there's so many.
Well, let's deal with the first one, shall we?
Well, interesting. I can't say anything bad about it.
Okay, well, I'll take over there then.
Okay, well, I mean, okay, well, you got,
No, I'm just kidding.
are we getting into the worst portrayal?
Oh, well, I think for my money we might be. Yeah, I mean, I certainly don't have the same kind of love for the Lost Boys that many people, certainly of my generation, seem to have. I remember seeing it in theaters when it came out, and I was still a kid at the time. And I remember walking out thinking, God, that was fucking terrible. That was just awful. And everybody else seems to love it. And so, I don't know, I always find it interesting when you talk vampires to talk about that film, because it seems to be some sort of demarcation line.
Yeah, certainly.
I thought that was more of a California vampire
Yeah,
film.
very much.
What is it? What was the slogan that was on the poster was stay up all night, never sleep, party on.
Yeah.
All this
Right.
thing.
I think that was
you know?
it. Yeah.
And it was about a family
to
moving, a young
paraphrase.
guy, all this kind of thing, and meets a man. And a little nostalgia factor in there with Corey Haim.
Sure.
You
Do you think
Feldman
that...
too, wasn't he in that? Corey Feldman?
Yeah,
Yeah, both,
Yeah.
both
Yeah.
Corys.
both stories.
I think that that this film suffers from something that a lot of vampire films after the fact started to suffer from as well, which is style over substance. I think that Lost Boys really kind of drove that style home, but didn't really have anything to back it up when it came to the actual story.
I won't argue. I'm not going to argue with that.
And I think we've seen that. I think we've seen that trickle down into a lot of the stuff that's come since then, right? I mean, I think you could even. I mean, we've kind of jokingly brought up Anne Rice in Interview with the Vampire and stuff like that. I think you can say that's definitely one of the problems there. Queen of the Damned is the same thing, right?
Yeah, Queen of the Damned was sort of like hip hop vampire film.
Yeah.
Not that there's anything wrong with that sort of thing.
Not
but,
that there's anything wrong with vampire films.
I mean, not if it's done well, there's nothing wrong with it. If it's done poorly, there's everything wrong with it.
Anne Rice, my view on... Now, are we talking the film of Interview with the
I'm
Vampire?
talking
or
the
book?
films, yeah.
Or the book? Okay. The film, I think I've only seen it once and everything, and actually I was surprised at Tom Cruise. His voice in that. I think there was a little bit of a sleaze to his voice, and the casting, Brad Pitt and everything. I thought, this is trying to be a mainstream picture, so we got to put these mainstream guys in it.
Sure, of course. Yeah.
And
Well, huge budget.
You gotta make some money, and Kirsten Dunst, I think, first.
Star turn performance there, right?
Yeah. There's all these elements in it. As a film, yes. As a story, no. But I shouldn't say no, because it's just a different interpretation of it. My views on Anne Rice and the way that she writes, we're not really talking out here. We're just talking about the movie. So, but it was a big budget picture, trying to get some big stars, trying to make some money, and I think they were trying to maybe turn it into a romance.
Yeah.
Because you got to get the women viewers, women audience people to come to these pictures, and I think that was an attempt at it.
Certainly not my. When I first saw it, I was a little surprised. Like in my mind, that wasn't Lestat. It just wasn't. So it took me out of the picture immediately. It's just, I don't know. The casting was suspect to me.
Well, you were saying you didn't like a blonde James Bond either.
I don't.
So,
I don't. Simply because I'm a reader of James Bond novels and have been since I was a boy. And if you read the description of James Bond,
he looks like Sean Connery, pretty close.
well, he looks like Hoagie Carmichael, is what Ian Fleming used to say.
Yeah.
But he has dark black hair.
Yeah.
There was like a coma that hangs over his eye all the time and a scar down his cheek, which no film has ever done. And you'll notice that even in Live and Let Die, Moore's hair was a little darker, and it got blonder as the films progressed. But no. So to me, I compare literature. I can't help it. If I've read a book, I have to compare it.
Well, you get a picture in your head, right?
Yeah. So that's so least favorite vampires, or performance, or.
Jeez.
I'll start off. I'm just going to say Frank Langella in Dracula. Very flat, boring, uninspiring. To me, it was kind of a waste of however many minutes it was of my life. It stuck to the story pretty closely, but there was nothing charismatic. It wasn't. It rang false to me when I watched it. And that was many years ago. That would be my least favorite. Apart from some really bad independent productions that I've seen that are just, I don't even try to include that anymore.
I'm not sure that they're fair, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there was a recent Dracula movie that was made that I scanned through it and went, no.
Yeah.
No.
What was that guy's name from Family Ties? Who played Nick, the boyfriend.
Oh. Yeah, I know the one.
He played a vampire in one movie, and it was pretty
Isn't
goddamn.
that Fright Night?
No.
No.
It was something low budget, and it was just him and somebody else. Just him and a girl were in it. And anyway, it was quite bad. I didn't love the portrayal of the gal in Innocent Blood either. I felt it was too overt, way too overt.
Terry?
Well, I kind of hinted about Gary Oldman before. In the spirit of the occasion, a comedy, Leslie Nielsen and Dead and Loving It.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
But, you got to look at it, the fact that it was a comedy. It was trying to be a comedy.
It was trying to be a Leslie Nielsen
comedy.
comedy.
Yeah. Yeah, well, exactly. Yeah.
Well, it's sort of a Leslie Nielsen airplane inspired.
It's his whole thing.
Spoof.
Yeah, if you're looking at that, but, the genre on that, it was trying for a comedy. I think the vampire deserves a little dignity. There's not many out there. In terms of stories that do come, we have a dividing point when they become killing machines, or killing machines are lovers. There's a point.
Yeah.
And again, if you go back to the source material, if you can use Dracula as a source material of the book, he is not a lover in the book. In fact, he's quite the opposite. He says that he will use women. He will destroy the men through the women. And he calls Mina, which they've never used this line in a movie, he calls Mina my little wine press. When he's in that moment when he's about to hold her and take her to this. Yeah, he calls her my little wine press. You will come here to do my bidding. You will cross land and sea to do my bidding. That's not the mark of, I love you. I'm the great, love has lasted for centuries. No,
that's creepy.
Yeah. It's the fact, that you are a food source and I will destroy you, which has never been played. And these are all aspects of things.
Okay.
Quick shout out to the good performances as well that we didn't mention that I'd kind of like to throw out there. Willem Dafoe in Shadow of the Vampire.
Yes.
Yeah.
He's great in that.
Yeah.
He's great.
Yeah. Or the sidelines of, we talked about this when we did Sinister Inclinations live, and I cannot remember the name of this. We'll have to look that up. The vampire from Last Man on Earth.
Oh, yeah.
Vincent Price.
Yeah. Again.
And he's sitting there pounding on the door, saying his name. And,
so many.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then there's the George Romero one, Martin.
Martin is good. Yeah, Martin's a good film.
That was low budget.
That's really well done.
The sidelines like Suspira. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right.
Suspiria.
Put a title under here.
Subtitles for Terry.
Yeah, subtitles for me. Yes. German underwater vehicles. Anyway.
Okay, well, before we move on to werewolves, we're going to take a short break and we'll be back right away.
Suspiria. 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 Suspiria.
those of our sons and daughters who cannot find understanding in the home, there are 100 evil substitutes abounding everywhere, and oftentimes with disastrous results.
My review concerns a picture made in 2015 called Victor Frankenstein. This picture, scripted by Max Landis, who is John Landis's son, which indeed is a interesting talking point, presents yet another retelling of the Frankenstein legend. Pushed by a younger cast in the presence of Daniel Radcliffe as the hunchbacked Igor, yes, I said Igor, and James McAvoy strutting and thrashing about as Victor Frankenstein, this picture is like one roller coaster ride of speedy dialogue in some scenes, gross humor. You get to watch an amputation of an abscessed hump off Radcliffe's back that results in his cure of being a hunchback. I disagree with some of the other reviews I have read of this picture, as in fact it does have a point. There is much influence from the Universal classic horror cycle, particularly the late 1940s style, which became popularly known as the monster rallies. Victor Frankenstein owes much to those particular films, as they were crafted more as action films. Firstly, Igor, played by Radcliffe, is first seen in a circus of which Victor Frankenstein is attending a performance to secure animal parts for an experiment. In the 1944 version of House of Frankenstein, J. Carrol Naish, a wonderful character actor, portrays a hunchback named Daniel, who is also dressed as a circus performer and is actually working in a freak show of which Dr. Neiman, played by Boris Karloff, are traveling the countryside undercover. Daniel is also wanting a cure for his ailment and does in fact pine for a gypsy girl, played by Alina Verdugo, who went on to play Consuelo in Marcus Welby television series, that they meet on a trip. Radcliffe's makeup in the opening sequence is white face and with black lines, very similar to Lon Chaney's clown makeup in the silent picture The Man Who Laughs, made in 1928. So there is much pedigree here. Radcliffe's Igor pines for a circus acrobat named Lorelei, played by Jessica Brown Findlay. Igor saves his love with his vast medical knowledge that he has self-taught himself, as she has fallen and sustains severe injuries, which impresses Victor Frankenstein, and the two become fast friends and begin their quest. They create a violent animal creature which runs amok over a research seminar. Both Igor and Victor get drunk and lay about on a floor and design their creature that is soon to be built, which features some very silly, humorous anecdotes. Needless to say, they succeed in a fit of effects, crashing water, thunder, and shouted dialogue, all very over the top. McAvoy says his "It's alive" line with the maniacal fury of Colin Clive in a 1931 version. In fact, it is a very worthy successor to Colin Clive's interpretation. McAvoy has the swagger of Peter Cushing in some moments, and the bravo of single-minded obsession. In fact, it is the story of the creator, not the creature, hence the title Victor Frankenstein, which many people miss. Igor and Victor become fast friends as the picture progresses. It's too bad that the film itself was poorly promoted, and having been released on Thanksgiving Day 2015. Victor Frankenstein runs 110 minutes of Universal classic monster / steampunk imagery, which fits a new way of telling a classic story seen through the eyes of today's influences. Not everybody's cup of tea, but that is the mark of a classic story as it continues to live through reinvention. Victor Frankenstein is a fun film.
Welcome back. I am here with Terry Sherwood, Keith Kollee, our guest. We were just discussing vampires and favorite vampire films, worst vampire films, that kind of thing. Is there anything else we want to say about vampires at all?
Basically, we've come pretty close. We kind of sucked it dry a little bit.
Boom.
But, you know, that's all right. I think we found a rich vein of folklore we could speaking about.
Okay, you get one more. One more. Come on. Come on. Come on. One more.
You know, I've got a good stake in this
There
conversation.
it is. There it is.
But I think we didn't really talk about. I don't know. But I think you wanted to say a little something about Ernau's Nosferatu and
Well,
some
yeah.
thoughts on it. And,
Well, I mean, if you look, I mean, we were talking about 30 Days of Night and that kind of thing, which sprung from Nosferatu.
no, it sprung from a comic.
Well, yes, but I mean, the comic sprung from, you know, I mean, they're more Nosferatu than they are Christopher Lee.
Well, then you can also say that what is it? Salem's Lot. Salem's Lot. is very
Oh, certainly Nosferatu inspired. Yeah. So,
Yeah, definitely. Actually, that's one of my favorite vampire novels. The scene where the man has to saw off the head of the woman he loves to keep her from turning was so well written that it actually, when you picture it, it horrifies you, and it also tears at your heartstrings. You know, it's such a good one. But as far as Nosferatu goes, I mean, it was. If you look at both films, you know, they're fairly close in the representation. But no, it's you know, certainly. Well, I mean, they're worth watching.
Did you like the Kinski version?
It was okay.
Well,
I liked it. It wasn't, you know, I mean, it was good. I mean, it wasn't my favorite. No, it was good. You know, the thing that did spring to mind though, you had mentioned earlier about vampire lore, and there's so many things that, you know, over the years, you know, going right back to Vlad the Impaler, and coming up, you know, like there's the garlic that keeps the vampire away. You should only, when you're driving a stake into a vampire, hit it once. If you hit it a number of times, it doesn't work. You know, I mean, are you familiar with any that?
yeah, I was. We were talking earlier about the mustard seeds on the roof. If you sprinkle mustard seeds on your roof, the vampire must stop and count every single mustard seed, and the logic in that is that he or she will stay until the sun rises to do it.
right. Almost like an OCD kind of personality.
Yeah, vampires, OCD vampire.
It is the mustard seed that compels you.
Yes, our mustard seed compels you. Yes. And the other one I was mentioning about is if a vampire takes control of a region, if he or she goes up to a bell tower, that's usually in the center of the town, and rings the bell, that everyone within the sound radius of the bell that hears it will drop dead. These are all.
That's a crazy one. I'd never heard.
That would be really. It was in a picture called In Search of Dracula. It was a documentary that Radu Florescu, might have got his name wrong, that did, and Raymond T. McNally, who did the book, the In Search of Dracula, and they began the research for Vlad Tepes and Castle Bran and the whole thing. So, but they put a warning in it too. They said that often he was regarded as a hero in it. So when you are coming there thinking to the country, you know, you have respect when you visit another country for its way of life. Don't approach him as a cinematic vampire.
Yeah. Don't approach him as a monster.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is one of their national heroes, who liberated their land. So have some respect.
Well, it's
Perspective.
perspective. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a funny thing.
I would love to go to some of those places like the monastery in Snagov, where the crypt is and everything, where supposedly it was excavated and his body wasn't there, which all contributes to the legend.
Wow, fascinating. So the next part of the question is favorite werewolf and least favorite werewolf depictions in cinema.
Well, I mean, Jim and I were talking earlier, and I think that among the best ones are An American Werewolf in London,
Certainly.
which is one of my personal favorites. Though I also quite like The Howling as well, the original. When we start getting into all the worst portrayals, let's start talking about all the sequels. And Ginger Snaps, I thought, was a really kind of innovative and revolutionary take on the whole legend itself.
Terry?
Yeah. Well, you can go back with. I'm going to go back with Lon Chaney, 1941. I'm going to go back with that, not just because I'm a stickler for those type of pictures, but all the legends of The Autumn Moon is Bright, The Silver Cane, I guess the kinship with the gypsies, it all came from that film. One folklore package, everything was there and set the pattern for it. And interesting to note that it also set the fact of his resurrection at the end.
True.
And it was capable of it. It also set the pattern for being a little bit more, I guess you can call them dimensional, pathos, in terms of I'm the reluctant monster, so to speak. I don't want to be turn into a wolf at night. As Lou Costello said, you and 20 million other guys. Comedy, But that I think is the salient, is the big point.
So and that reminds me then of the Italian films, right, with Paul
Nashi.
Nashi.
I don't know how to
Yeah.
pronounce it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure which it is, but I mean, what did he do, like 30 movies as the Wolfman, and he almost kind of became the hero of those films, right? So that kind of takes it in that kind of direction that you're talking about, right, with the pathos, and almost in heroing. That's not even a word. I'm just gonna make shit up, guys. Okay, that's how this is gonna roll. But yeah, making him the hero of the piece, right, and making him have that nobility about him.
There's a certain nobility in all the monsters that we know and love. There's one. That's an old thing. Drifting a little bit from the werewolf aspect of it. Karloff's Frankenstein was always his pathos incorporated right there. We think of these creatures that rise above their films, and with those, Lon Chaney, Lugosi, and Mr. Karloff's portrayal of the Frankenstein monster in the first one, 1931, set the pattern, and there's a dimensionality about them.
Well, thanks, guys. You just stole all mine. I'll agree with you that.
What about worst? I think you told your best, right? You said your best.
Yeah.
No, I think we stole his best.
You stole your best.
You stole my best. I mean, I would say The Wolfman. I would say American Werewolf in London, and I would include Ginger Snaps.
What about the remake of Wolfman, with Benicio del Toro?
I didn't care for it.
I similarly did not care for it.
I think that was a script that was lifted from the original 41. It's the other masterpiece, and perhaps a little more than it should have been transposed to. Not today, but using today's technology.
Yeah.
It would have been good if we perhaps would have did some changes or something in that.
my affection for An American Wolf in London and not its sequel. I mean, as a younger man, watching the work that Rick Baker did to transform David Naughton into the vampire was revolutionary. And here's a question.
It still holds up too.
It does, yeah. Do you prefer like the lichens in Underworld, or that style, like a loping dog, or do you prefer a guy on two legs? And
I prefer the upright myself. I find it a little more.
There's a big joke in that.
Easy, Tiger. Easy. I don't know. I find them more intimidating. I find them scarier. Almost like Sasquatchian, rather than.
Well, it's a wolf man, not a man wolf.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Honorable mention would probably be the depiction of vampires in both TV series. The British version and the American version of Being Human.
Of vampires or werewolves?
Actually, they're both good.
Both, yeah, fair enough. Yeah.
Yeah.
I would agree with that.
Yeah, very good. Any really awful werewolf films that you've seen?
Well, one more good one, actually, before we move on to that, is Gary Marshall's Dog Soldiers.
Yes.
That one's a lot of
Yes.
fun.
That's interesting that you guys brought up that point about the traditional four-legged creature as opposed to standing up. Again, that's a fusion of the folklore vampire, or folklore werewolf, and cinematic.
Yeah.
They were always, if you look at some of the woodcuts, they're always, even if you look at something like the woodcuts from Little Red Riding Hood, and, it's four-legged.
Yeah.
So, and if you watch in the 1941 picture with Lon Chaney, he walks upright. He's not flat-footed. He walks upright on the tips
The balls of his feet.
So,
Okay. So, anything particularly bad?
Well, I think all of the Howling sequels can be lumped into one giant shit sandwich.
Yeah, pretty much.
I'm sorry, I'm not trying to be mean, but come on, man, the marsupials, god damn it, that was hard to watch.
that's kind of like leads me into, that's what lichens, isn't it? That's kind of similar now to that.
Yeah, pretty much.
And
I just finished watching the latest Underworld, and they keep making the same movie.
Yeah. It's all too slick and glossy for me. There's no grit to it whatsoever.
Like, well, maybe in the next 3 sequels, maybe there'll be some conclusion to it. Who knows?
I wouldn't bet on it.
But as far as bad ones, I mean, I've seen some indie ones that were just.
now, what do you mean by bad? Like the use of the character or the use of the...
Well,
Well, I think that in werewolf movies, they almost have to go hand in hand because, I mean, the money shot of a werewolf film is the transformation. Everybody's waiting for it. Everybody wants to see it. And if you fuck it up, you may have had a pretty decent movie up until that point, but no one's going to remember that. Everyone's going to hate it from there on out. Right? So it's a real double-edged sword, that transformation portion.
I've never thought of that. That is the money shot of all these films.
Yeah.
It is.
There were other sidelights to it too. In the, I think it was 1935, they did Werewolf of London, the Heaven Hull. Actually,
Yes.
predated the Chaney version, and that was a completely different makeup. That was Jack Pierce doing different things, and I think it was Jack Pierce. I might be wrong.
Actually, the transformation for its time was pretty good.
Yeah, the transformation in that, the story in that, it was different. It's often neglected too. You
That
know,
we
you
just
get the
did
violence.
till the last part here. So.
Yeah. And June Lockhart in the She-Wolf one too.
I don't know either one of those.
Okay.
So what about something a little more modern, like Wolf Cop?
Are we talking about bad pictures?
Yeah, we're talking.
I don't know. Are we?
I'm going to go with Teen Wolf as a poor choice.
Certainly Teen Wolf 2.
Yes.
That was a two.
Oh, yes.
Oh, Jason Bateman?
Yeah.
Oh,
I
yeah.
thought. Oh, okay. I just think, again, it's like taking a character and turning it into a comedy. While you're doing that and everything, I can see if you're trying to create something of the effect of students and this whole high school environment, and you have the outsider and the different person and this kind of thing. I can see that. You know.
Okay, your guys' thoughts on Michael Landon? I Was a Teenage Werewolf.
Good stuff.
Yep.
I like Michael Landon in that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not my favorite.
It's not my favorite, but it's decent.
It's all right.
Yeah.
You know.
It was American International Pictures got to do that. And that was teen exploitation.
Yeah.
You know? At its best. That surfboards. And rock and
Yeah,
roll.
and rock and roll.
Take that.
A couple of really underrated werewolf picks, I think, are Wolfen and Bad Moon.
Wolfen.
Yeah. What was? I agree with that. What was the one Jack Nicholson was in?
Wolf.
Do not think that one's underrated. I didn't care for that one at all.
I didn't care for it either, to be honest.
So, I don't. Not. Do you think the werewolf is now a neglected creature, other than the what's going on with Underworld?
Well, there are still productions. There's some indie ones coming down the road, but it goes in phases, you know.
I see what you did there. That was good.
Yeah. The werewolf's time will come again, you know. I mean, that resurgence of vampires with Twilight.
Well, they had.
And werewolves.
Yeah.
Yeah, and werewolves, but you know, but mostly for the sparkly vampires and the handsome vampire, and you know, I think it's cyclical. It'll come back again.
I'm going to go out on a limb here and I'm going to talk about two films that I haven't even seen,
Okay.
but that I've heard some good stuff about. Both of them are quite recent, last couple of years. One is called Wer, I believe, W-E-R.
Mm-hmm.
Supposedly very, very innovative, kind of mind-blowing, kind of a brand new approach to the whole idea.
Okay.
And another one is called Late Phases. Again, supposed to be a very, very well told story about, I believe it's an aging werewolf, but has gotten really, really great reviews. So those are two that we may want to kind of check out at some point.
Thank you. You just reminded me that I completely forgot about the vampire and Let Me In.
Yes.
It just occurred to me.
Oh, Let Me In or Let the Right One In?
Let the right one in. Both of them.
I did want to talk about that and I forgot.
I did
Yeah.
too, and I forgot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, and the appearance, you know, this child is a creature of the night. And what happens to her and what happens in her world of with her young playmate and everything, and their world of things, school and things like that. It was really good. Remade later by the new Hammer. There it is. So.
I had a bad experience with Let the Right One In. I haven't seen the remake. But with Let the Right One In, we were watching it at a horror marathon at my house. And all the previous movies had been very bombastic and violent and fun and good crowd movies, right? And then we put in Let the Right One In, and we watched, and it was not the right crowd to be watching that film with, right? So I kind of came away from it with a bad taste for it, but I've been hankering to go back and re-examine my opinion on it, because I've been told by enough people that I might be wrong in my opinion. You know, the time period in which we watched it, it was a little too slow, a little too plodding, a little too atmospheric for what the crowd wanted, right? And so everybody kind of came away going, "Oh, that kind of sucked." But I'm actually not sure that that's accurate.
It's like it's a very European look to it, the first one. And, it's slower paced.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, it's slower paced. It's more atmospheric. It's perhaps some of the European pictures are prone to do. We even forgot Vampire,
Yes.
you know,
Oh, yeah.
way back when, you know, the silent versions. You know, we forgot about that, but
And Vampiros Lesbos.
yes.
Forgot about
Yes.
that too.
Yeah,
Franco? Was that Franco?
Yeah.
That's
yeah,
Franco,
it was
right?
Franco.
Yeah.
that's like Orgy of the Dead, too.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, let me hold you in my cold, long arms. Where I got that from? It was on the poster. It was.
Getting back.
Werewolves, yes.
Yeah. Getting back to werewolves. One I'd like to hear your guys' opinion on because it's not technically a werewolf film, but Brotherhood of the Wolf.
Oh, I love that movie.
Right?
Yeah.
I love that movie. I wish more movies were out there like that. You know, it has a running time of what, almost 3 hours?
Yeah, pretty close.
And when it's done, you go, oh, I wish there was more.
Yeah.
You know, I really wish there
Yeah,
was
yeah.
more. I mean, what can you say? You know, you try to describe that movie to somebody. Well, it's a period piece that features murders, possibly a werewolf, martial arts.
Matrix style martial arts.
That was a well done French film.
Yeah.
Kudos to them.
Yeah.
It wasn't one of the actors now on Iron Chef.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Who's
He's
that?
He's the host of the Iron
host of Iron
Chef, Manny.
Oh, DeCostas?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he's, you know, the secret ingredient is.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Good
He's
for
a lot
him.
older now. He doesn't have the long hair.
Sure, yeah.
And he's
Oh,
always,
yeah. And he is actually a very talented martial artist. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
because he does this move, you know, when they point to the secret. I'm plugging a show that I'm not supposed to.
Today's broadcast brought to you by the Iron Chef.
Yeah.
We love you, Guy Fieri. You want to give us some money for sponsorship?
Yeah. I went to your restaurant in New York, actually. I thought it was good.
Oh, it's cute that you think he's watching.
Yeah.
I-
Diners, drive-ins, and dives. Love
I
it, buddy.
had
Love
The
it.
burger and it's closed.
Oh yeah, keep telling him all about it. He's listening. He's taking notes.
Anyway, werewolf. Hey, no, segue to that. We were talking about, I was talking about Fieri's restaurant, I was talking about meat, and we're still talking about werewolves.
Oh, there you go.
Look at that.
Well, it's funny actually that you draw that parallel because just this afternoon I watched a Canadian werewolf film from 2009, I believe directed by Brian Singleton, called Werewolf Fever. It's quite low budget, but they clearly put all of the money into the special effects, none to the actors. But the climax of that, or rather the denouement of that particular movie, has them turning the werewolf into hamburgers and selling them.
Wow, that's
So that actually that dovetailed together nicer than I think you imagined.
Well,
yes, it did.
that kind of synchronicity is freaky.
Right?
Yes. I might have to lay down.
Big Bad Wolf.
Okay.
I want to throw that in there with
This is worse.
bad
Worse?
bad depictions of a werewolf. It's just, I mean, it's maybe bad is not the right word. It's very different. It's very dark. It's very nasty. It's very ugly. And like you had mentioned before with the pathos and sometimes even nobility of the werewolf character, this was a very, very different take on that.
What about there's a television series out with a woman who used to bite, it was called.
A werewolf
It was
TV
a werewolf
series?
series. It was a woman. It was a
Oh,
woman-
Not
that's
Hemlock
right.
Grove. Are you thinking of
There
Hemlock
was
Grove?
Hemlock Grove, and there was one called Bite.
Oh.
Yeah, I think there was.
And
I never watched
it. Was
it.
short. It was only lasted a year.
Probably a dozen episodes or something.
Yeah. So that's, you know, again, we're seeing television taking a role in these things.
Sure.
As well it should. Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, and it's interesting. Correct me. Some people out there will correct me if I'm not. If they leave a card or a letter or an email or a tweet.
Or a brick through his front window,
Yeah.
whatever.
Yes.
Or about
Well,
leaving a
think-
message on our Facebook page.
I don't think they've used vampire. Well, they use vampires, yes, but not werewolves in a American Horror Story. They've stayed away from that. They've used vampirism.
Did they not in the second season in
I
Asylum?
don't know. I just vampires were in definitely in hotel.
Yeah.
Hotel series.
Yeah. Asylum had like 100 different things going on. I feel like a werewolf must have been one of them.
I don't know. I honestly I haven't viewed the entire series, so just more I've watched Freak Show and Hotel, and they haven't used it yet.
While we're still on vampires, were you ever able to find a full version of that Canadian production of Dracula that you sent me the link to, partial?
You mean the one that was done by a company called CBC did it. I think it was CBC, and it's called Purple Playhouse. And it was an actor by the name of Norman Walsh did it.
Any relation to Mary?
Yeah. Yes. Yes. As a matter of fact, she's in her, I think he wore a Wonder Woman costume underneath. But he did this on television. It was 1 hour. And it was a series of dramas that the CBC or CTV produced it. And the flagship of it was, we're leaving this out, bringing another classic creature into it, Jack Palance's television version of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, which we could go into which version of that, and offshoots of that is.
Well, and certainly that wouldn't be too far a stretch from the werewolf genre, because they're kind of mirrors of each other in a lot of ways.
Transformation.
Yeah.
Reluctant.
A dark side coming out.
Yeah. Yes. Different takes on it. From the Barrymore versions to the Frederick Marsh version to the Spencer Tracy version, which I love the Spencer Tracy version. With Ingrid Bergman and Lana Turner. Yes.
One of the big things that makes me think that the cancellation of Penny Dreadful isn't what we've been told is, if you knew the series was going to wrap up, why would you introduce the character of Dr. Jekyll and not use him? And the guy who they'd cast as Dr. Jekyll now plays the security officer in Star Trek Discovery. Fine actor. But one of my favorites has to be the SCTV spoof where Scott Baio, Martin Short as Scott Baio, is Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde.
You couldn't get through a show on vampires without mentioning Count Floyd.
Count Floyd,
yeah.
And what was
The Hilarious House of
Yes.
Dr.
Billy Van.
Frankenstein or something
What was
like that?
Billy Van? What was his character?
The Count.
I had to ask.
So there you go.
Were you
Felt like
fond-
it was right there.
That was laying there on the ground and I tripped over it.
What are your thoughts of Juan, the Count on Sesame Street?
Oh, that serves a purpose. I think it's fun. That's like saying that I go home and eat my Count Chocula or something.
Well, it's certainly indicative of how prevalent the vampire mythos has become in our society, right? We have versions of it geared towards children, for Christ's sake. You know what I mean? Like that's it's everywhere.
Yeah, and that's part of the allure of a classic character. They get reinterpreted, and they get restructured, and they get run through a mill. If I could use the illustration of the vampire story similar to Hamlet and similar to Shakespeare. Shakespeare is constantly reinterpreted throughout the ages, in a particular time. And then you have vampires and werewolves and creatures of transformation that are being reinterpreted.
Well, funny that you should mention how mainstream, that there are products out there now appealing to children. Musically speaking, I think there's more songs about werewolves than vampires. You've got, Werewolves of London, of course.
Sure.
Yeah. The Five-Man Electrical Band, Werewolf, great song. I don't know any songs about vampires, and not unless you get into the,
Tragically Hip did one.
Steve did they? A long time ago?
Werewolf, their first record with the blue cover.
Yeah, but there's lots of songs about werewolves, not so many songs about vampires.
I know a band called 13 Strikes, and there's one called Vampire Bat.
Oh, I know. I've heard of them.
Yeah, so have I.
Yeah, maybe they'll perform Vampire Bat live here one of these days.
Yes. Oh, look!
Here they come now.
Here they come now.
This was so unexpected.
Yes.
Right. Well, we're going to take a short break.
Hang on,
Oh.
Jim, before you do that, before we get off of this topic of
Okay.
werewolves and vampires and great performances and great versions thereof, I cannot let this go past without talking about the Monster Squad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of my absolute favorite all-time films.
Actually, yeah.
Yeah.
The vampire fellow was quite.
He was great.
Yeah.
He was majestic and imposing and menacing. And the Wolfman gets kicked in the balls and then blown up with a stick of dynamite and pulls himself back together. I mean, that is some hardcore shit.
Yeah.
In a kid's movie.
17th Avenue in Calgary, you get that. Or any Main Street for that matter.
Oh, you're absolutely right. You know, once this is edited together and we put it out, we're going to be going, oh, geez, we forgot this one, this one, this one, and this one.
Yeah.
No,
Oh, yeah,
also,
of course.
We forgot about monsters and everything. We're forgetting the Mummy. Mr. Cruise's picture.
No. Yes.
So
Well,
that's a whole different discussion that we can put bandages on and use it as perhaps, another session.
Yeah.
Sort of our in-home top 10.
with that one, we're going to take a short break. We'll be right back.
This is your thing.
In film history, there have been a handful of heroes who came to define their generation, who weren't afraid to answer the difficult questions we all face,
How am I gonna wipe my butt?
or to take a stand against injustice in all its forms.
Bastard! I had no idea. I mean, I still have no idea. What does that mean?
Who weren't afraid to reach out and touch their fellow man, no matter how crazy they may be.
Crazy about this dick.
Who taught us that however desperate our situation may seem, there is always a light at the end of the tunnel.
I have no idea where I'm going in life. I could really use a hand. Job.
Ron Wardieheimen is this generation's hero, and his movie
It is the untouchable Bosco Juice.
The first film this evening that I'm going to review is again from my zombie review film site. It's a film called Evil from 2005. As far as I know, this is the only zombie film produced in Greece, and what a zombie film it is. Engaging from start to finish and filled with particularly well-done gore, this film will satisfy all of your viewing desires. Athens is under siege from the Walking Dead, and a small group of survivors try to cope and survive. An old story, yes, but this film manages to make you care for the characters, something that a lot of Hollywood films fail miserably at. You can relate to them because they talk and act like real people. There are some unique kills here and a few scenes that I've never seen before in a film, but I've wanted to. I highly recommend Evil, even if you happen to be one of those folks who can't stand subtitles. Hi, welcome back to Sinister Inclinations. We have a question. Terry? Keith? All right. The question is, what are your favorite foreign horror films? And that comes to us from Eduardo from Asoyas.
Lovely town, Soyuz, by the way.
It is.
Yes, it is.
I hear they go fruit there.
Yes.
Warmest freshwater lake in all of North America.
Yes.
Yes.
Peaches and cream. Peaches and herb. You like them.
Oh, Peaches and Herb, yeah.
Yeah.
Still, you know,
Can you tell we're trying to think of foreign films here? This is kind of.
you know, it's been almost 7,000 days that I've been waiting for the new Peaches and Herb album. I'm beginning to think it's not going to happen.
You might have to get that one out.
All right. Well,
foreign films.
Yeah.
Other than North America.
so
yeah.
Nothing. Well, we're considered foreign to American markets sometimes. I've
Yeah,
seen
that's
that.
Canadian, foreign, and domestic.
Okay. Let's make that to anywhere that's not in North America.
Okay.
North America, including Mexico.
Yeah. I guess Mexico.
Well, I don't have any favorite Mexican horror films.
They had a lot. They have rich heritage.
Well, they do.
But
Los Santos.
yes.
Yeah.
And our buddy Coffin Joe.
Yeah.
Coffin Joe, yeah.
Well, I mean, I won't say that there's none of my favorites. I mean, it's not my favorites. I mean, I like Night of the Bloody Apes.
Yeah.
I liked it a lot, but
What's did you just refer to the wrestler? I think they have wrestling.
Yeah,
Wrestling.
yeah, I did. Yeah, I did.
Yeah.
yeah.
You know, and
Yeah, he was in like 60 films.
yeah.
Yeah, we should get
I think he
ourselves.
fought monsters and stuff.
Yeah, we should get ourselves with masks and do a whole episode in them.
I have one.
Yeah,
Yeah. Wow.
for your wife, no doubt.
Whoa, he's a attacker.
No, I mean for you to wear.
Oh, okay, yeah. So she doesn't look at me.
Suddenly got
Yeah,
it.
that makes more sense.
50 Shades of Grey. So.
Foreign films. Okay. Well, my head immediately goes to Fulci. Zombie, being one of my favorites. I like that one a great deal.
The New York Ripper.
New York Ripper. Yeah. Manhattan Baby.
Yeah.
I would suggest Nightmare Castle, Art of Steel. You know, the Bravo films, Black Sabbath,
Yeah.
all of these. You know, some of the very European in feel, using European actors. Frankenstein's Castle of Freaks. These. Some of the blood from Dracula's Castle is one. Another one. You also there's such a rich heritage of Euro horror, and I think that one I mentioned too that I screwed the title up.
Suspiria.
Suspiria. How come I can't say that? No, that had the various what they did the whole thing with color and the sound and everything and that. So.
Yeah, I don't know. I think maybe I watched that too young, because I did not get it, and frankly, I didn't get a lot of Dario Argento stuff back then. And I think I need to come at it again now that I have a little more life perspective and a little more perspective on the art of filmmaking and stuff like that. I think it will appeal to me differently.
Yeah, I think the cinematography and it has that very European feel to it.
Yeah, well, very dreamlike, right? Like, especially something like Suspiria, right? Very, very dreamlike, and like you say, the use of color and stuff like that. But almost no story to speak of, right? I think that's where I got hung up on it. The first time I watched it was that I was more story driven than I was atmosphere and look driven.
Well, sometimes you can get bombed with sensory. I think it's more of a sensory film.
Yeah.
You know, almost like the cook, the thief, his wife, and your mother.
Yeah.
You know, that kind of the draftsman's contract or any of these. These pictures, you get all caught up in. Wow, this is really great. What are they doing? You know, and then you have to go back and see these things. I could toss in. I don't know the name of the series, but it's a series where the dead are soldiers and they're silent. And they walk towards sound, and there was a series of pictures.
Oh, is that the Blind Dead?
Yep.
The Blind Dead series?
Blind
Yeah.
Dead.
Let
Dead.
Sleeping Corpses Lie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, and Cemetery Man.
Oh, Cemetery Man's great.
Yeah.
Boy, we're really walking into zombie territory here.
Yeah.
Cemetery Man's
You walked with a zombie.
But no, yeah.
Honestly, that's a series. There's also a book.
Yeah, there is.
Tom Weaver wrote a book. And he said, "I talked with a zombie," and it's interviews.
Cool. Yeah, so I mean, we've talked, Fulci there.
Yep.
Zombie, obviously. We've talked a little Jess Franco, any particular Franco films that you particularly enjoy? Or?
You did Count Dracula.
Yes.
Oh, you did do
Frank
Dracula,
did
that's right.
Christopher Lee's version of it, the version he said was closest to the book. To a point. BBC's version of Dracula with Louis Jourdain done in 1977 is still a benchmark. If you have a chance to see it, it's also available on a streaming service. But I'm not going to tell you the name. But you can find it because you're internet savvy. Okay. With Frank Finley and Louis Jourdain. Wonderful. Would you consider that a foreign film because it's BBC produced?
Well, I guess, I mean, given our parameters, it has to be.
Yeah.
So,
Well,
I loved the French extremist movement. I was a big fan of that, like Outside and Frontiers and Martyrs and, High Tension. Yeah.
what is the one called? Calvary?
Calvaire.
Thank you.
Calvary.
Another one I can't say.
Eel.
So,
there was a bunch of really great films that came out through that French extremist movement. Very violent though, guys. Very violent.
I loved Martyrs.
Martyrs is
that,
harrowing.
The first 15-20 minutes of Martyrs there is just. What did you think of the remake?
Ooh.
No, unnecessary. Totally unnecessary.
Totally unnecessary.
Yeah.
Why?
That was
The
my
first
thought,
one is
too.
perfect.
Mhm.
It is beautiful and harrowing. So difficult to watch, but so rewarding when it's all said and done.
Very true.
what are you guys interested in your opinion on? What do you guys think of Human Centipede?
You know what? Okay. I'm going to segue into a couple of other films that remind me of that. One of which is a Serbian film, and the other of which is Sallow, or the 120 Days of Sodom. Sallow is you guys watched Masters of Horror, right?
Right.
The cigarette burns episode, right? Where you watch something, it takes a little piece of your soul away and leaves you a changed person. That's what Sallow did to me. I watched Sallow and I've never felt whole afterwards. That movie was so affecting and awful that I would never ever recommend anyone watch it. Much like a Serbian film.
If you've never seen Sallow, based upon the works of the Marquis de Sade, modernized, it's broken into chapters: Circle of Blood, Circle of Shit. By most standards today, I think it would be considered tame.
Yeah?
In a way.
I don't know, man. There's a realism almost to it. Maybe it's the foreign aspect of it, right?
The fascists. And
it becomes, I don't know, the entire point of the movie is degradation of the body, degradation of the mind, degradation of the spirit. And I found it so bombing. Do you know what I mean? Like it was just like a punch to the face every 3 minutes. You know what I mean? And there was just this gritty reality to it, almost a la Texas Chainsaw Massacre, right? Where it almost had this real feel to it, which is what makes it one of the greatest of all times. But this one had this almost real feel to it that was kind of sickening.
Well, in a way, because the character of the president, who looks so odd and bizarre, and that gives it a surrealism.
Yeah.
And, the madam who's talking about, there's a diet that women can eat that'll actually make their shit taste better. It's like, it's not for your average person any more than a Serbian film is.
Yeah, absolutely, right? I mean, I mean, we're talking about some pretty extreme films right now in terms of violence or subject matter.
And then you start getting into the August Underground trilogy and stuff like that,
Yeah.
But no, a Serbian film, I saw a funny shirt that was available.
What a segue.
Wait, funny?
Well, if you've seen the film, you can't help but laugh, and I don't because the movie is disturbing, and this is here's the T-shirt. What it says: I liked a Serbian film, so fuck you and your baby.
Oh God.
But
Yeah, I remember watching that movie, man, and I mean literally getting to that part and going,
well,
oh my god, I'm still watching this. I'm watching a movie that is doing this. Is there something wrong with me now?
It makes you wonder that.
Right?
2 times in my life, I've turned my face away from the screen. The baby scene was one.
Yeah. I can believe it.
And actually, in many ways now, it's actually turned me off from all of the hardcore, violent.
Sure.
I've pretty much seen it all.
Yeah.
I mean, what more can you show?
Right. What else you got for me?
Well, I mean, at the end of the first August Underground's Mortem, where you have a scene that contains pedophilia, necrophilia, and sodomy in one scene.
Yeah.
You go, well, where do you go from there?
Yeah.
What else could you depict?
And should you go anywhere else from there?
Well, we had that discussion earlier. I mean, things that horrify us as a society, do we actually put them up on the screen?
Yeah.
Or are you inspiring people, giving them ideas?
Right.
It's interesting you guys are talking about this because there's no mythical creature involved in this, but the monster has become human.
Yeah.
Well, look at our history.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's even evident in the decline of the monster film and the rise of the slasher film in the 80s, right? I mean, so often that was just man's inhumanity to man.
Yes, and it's more man's inhumanity to woman.
Yeah, well, certainly yes, in a lot of them, yes.
Which has been the staple of the horror film and the horror genre for over 150 years.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just the way. I'm not saying it's correct. We are getting the rise now. I think we alluded it in our previous show about the Final Woman. I think Final Woman syndrome, and how they seem to be surviving, like the Ripleys from Alien. All of these, the women are the ones that are finding the resolution.
Which brings me to
Ripley, interestingly.
Ripley
is now a Disney princess. Well, yeah, Disney bought Fox, and now she's a Disney princess.
That'd be Sigourney Weaver. Is that?
Yeah.
Wow.
The baddest ass of all the Disney princesses.
I might have to lay down again. This is too much.
With that, on a more positive note, I think probably my favorite foreign horror film is a film called Wither.
Is that the Norse one?
No, it's an Evil Dead.
Yeah.
Pastiche. Yeah.
Yeah. That's a great film. Yeah.
It's gory. It's funny in parts, and it is basically, I mean, the Evil Dead. I mean, right down to certain shots.
Yeah.
And has an actress that is possibly one of the most beautiful women on the earth, Amanda Renberg, who plays. She's the blonde, the central character.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and then Final Girl again. But that's a superior film. See, this kind of question, though, I mean, we could break it up. We could say, okay, well, let's go to the European. Any favorite Japanese films?
I was just gonna say, I'd love to get into some Asian films, right? I mean, like Takamieke, or Takamieke.
Something you can't say.
Yeah, I guess. Hey, how many beers have I had? I'm a big fan of his stuff. Like Audition is such a fascinating little film because the first 3/4 of that movie are so ordinary they're almost boring. And then all of a sudden this really weird shit starts to happen and you're like, wait, what is happening here? And then the last 20 minutes of that movie become some of the most harrowing you'll ever watch. Right? With the piano wire and the needles and holy shit, it just goes batshit. Right? But I mean, you look at some of Miike's other stuff like Ichi the Killer.
I loved Ichi the Killer.
That's a great film. I'm not sure it necessarily technically qualifies as horror, but it is certainly horrific in a lot of aspects.
Well, if you were going to, I mean, it's in the same regard as saying Henry's Portrait of a Serial Killer. Yeah. Is it a horror film or is it a film about a serial killer?
Right.
It's a horror film.
Yeah.
What about the Battle Royale series?
I don't know about the series, but I certainly like the first one.
The first ones.
Yeah.
There were like 6 of them, weren't there, or something?
I think so. All right. So
Godzilla.
Gojira.
Gojira, yeah.
Yeah.
Godzilla. Yes.
Yeah.
There's some great Vietnamese ones too, what's that one called? R Point, I believe. It's about almost like ghostly soldiers.
Oh, okay.
So that's really good. I mean, and if we wanted to talk about like the Korean revenge films, right? A film like I Saw the Devil is
I Saw the Devil is
spectacular.
Yes.
And I mean, again, maybe not technically horror, but it's friggin' close enough, man. That's one of the most violent movies I've ever seen.
Well, if you do include, man's inhumanity to man, then you kind of almost have to. If you categorize it as horror, then you add it in.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
There's a lot of people who say The Exorcist isn't a horror film. Well, I beg to differ.
Sure.
But
What else would it be?
well, it's on a religious sort of a moralistic fable, rather than a horror film. I've heard that.
That really feels like splitting hairs.
That would
Yeah,
be
that's to me.
interesting to hear the reasoning on that.
But no, there's Koreans. What was the one? The dumplings.
Yeah. Untold Story.
The Untold Story. Yeah,
I'm thinking of
that was
it.
decent.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed that film.
That's the one too with the chopsticks too,
Mhm.
isn't it?
Yep.
Yeah, and the chopstick scenes. And didn't they have a chopstick scene in The Evil Dead?
I believe
The
they.
first one?
First Evil Dead?
No.
No chopsticks.
There was something of tree branches or something.
Tree branches. Yes.
Yeah. There's a chopstick. The chopstick one in The Untold Story.
Yeah.
And I couldn't watch that. They stopped. I don't recall how far I got into it at the time. And I just went,
Okay.
I'm a wimp about stuff like that.
The Untold Story is what it's called?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know that one. I'm going to look that one up.
Look it up.
Yeah, I'm a wimp about, honestly, I'm a wimp about that and gore. And I fully, absolutely stand here, rather sit here and admit it. So.
See, I'm a bit of a gore hound myself.
I'm a bit of a gore hound.
What about the autopsy genre?
Oh.
I've seen many of those on the shelf. I don't know how you guys feel about stuff like
Well, I mean,
medical films.
medical films or maybe even possibly the guinea pig films.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did you see American Guinea Pig?
I didn't see the American. No. Yeah. I've seen some of the other ones, and they just. Yeah, I'm a bit of a gore hound, but I also need a story.
Mm-hmm.
I actually require one.
Yeah.
And when they're just individual scenes strung together of being awful, they don't really.
Get that on the news.
Yeah, exactly right. They don't necessarily do it for me.
No. Well, there was a time I used to watch them for curiosity value.
Sure.
And I think I've really, what more can you show me? I watched American Guinea Pig and went, well, it's largely unconvincing. And there comes a point where you go, well, like the Vomit Gore trilogy.
Yeah.
You go, it's kind of unnecessary,
Yeah.
Gorno is fine if that's what you're into. But I just don't think it's really my cup of tea anymore.
Yeah.
So we've covered Asia, Europe.
Ooh, Australia, Dead Alive.
Yeah. Oh yeah, and
Dead Alive is one of my absolute favorites.
Back when Peter Jackson told funny stories.
Exactly.
And good stories.
What's the recent one?
Wolf Creek.
Nope. Came out. We did this panel live, and somebody mentioned it. It's like Boondocker or something. I don't remember the title of it.
Babadook?
Babadook, thank you.
Oh, the Babadook.
Oh,
Babadook.
Yeah.
Yeah, Boondocker. Where did I get that? Billy Joel Roy.
The Babadook Saints.
Billy Connolly shows up with some guns and helps out the Babadook.
But Babadook. That's Australia.
Well, which brings me to a television series that is produced by Netflix Australia. It just recently won the best television series in Australia. It's ran for 2 seasons. There's 12 episodes. It's called Glitch. And it is superior. You might say it's kind of a zombie thing because one evening, a bunch of residents dig themselves out of their graves. And they're from various periods of time and whatever. And there's, well, without spoiling anything, I can't go too much further. Superior acting and the story just keeps you intrigued continuously. And it's such a good show.
Yeah, I heard about that.
Yeah. So Australia, yeah. I recall a few zombie films from Australia that were pretty good.
Yeah, what was that? Undead.
Yeah.
Undead's pretty fun.
Yeah. Yeah. I think we'd have to look at Dead Snow.
Dead Snow? Dead Snow's good.
German, isn't it?
Yeah, and Dead Snow too. They were both. I don't think the sequel was quite as funny as the original or good.
I agree.
But it was maybe 75% of it, and there were still some fantastic scenes.
Yeah, there were. Yeah.
You know, so I really enjoyed those, the German zombies. Yeah.
Yeah. It was a Norse production though, wasn't it?
I believe it was.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, no, so, you know, it's...
Yeah, that's a great one.
You know, one country that we kind of lumped into and everything kind of like glossed over it a little bit was a country that actually is not that I'm into this, the cradle of death metal, which is Iceland.
Iceland.
What sort of pictures come out of there? You know,
Icelandic horror.
Is Haxan Icelandic?
Possibly, yeah. That was
It's Norse. It's one of the two.
History of witches.
That's right. Yeah. From like 1932 or something.
Yeah. And I'm just thinking that would be a possible hotbed of terror tales.
Yeah, certainly. I don't know that I've seen any Icelandic films.
Or
wait,
something
wasn't
there.
was Troll Hunter Icelandic?
I believe it was.
It could be another question for our viewers. Email.
Look it up,
help us
man.
out.
I'm sitting here drinking beer. You look.
Okay, well, Dead Snow, Red versus Dead, Iceland.
Oh, it's Iceland.
Yeah, and Iceland has such a peculiar culture that's so interesting.
Yeah.
You know, they still consult the fairies and stuff when they want to build a road and stuff.
Right.
You know, it's just. I watched Anthony Bourdain's No Reservations one evening about Iceland, and it just I want to go there so badly. It's just such a weird, cool culture.
Yeah.
But
if you like death metal too, like I was mentioning,
yeah,
that's
death
the cradle
metal.
of death metal.
Yeah.
Where they actually burn churches. Do it. Like,
Ireland's had some good horror films. What was that one? Grabbers was really fun. I mean, it's a bit of a horror comedy, so probably not up your alley, but it's a lot of fun. Where these alien creatures come down and they're killing all of these people and draining them of their blood, but then they realize that they won't and can't drain the blood of anybody who's intoxicated. There's alcohol in their system, so the whole town has to stay drunk the entire time and try and fight off these aliens.
And this was Irish?
Yeah.
Well, what's the problem?
Right? Just rolling right into that stereotype. And what was that other one? That was, bollocks. I'm not going to remember the name of it now. The Hallows.
The Hallows, yes.
Nah, it might not be plural. It might just be the Hallow. Anyway, that was a really good film as well.
I may be thinking of a TV series. Anyway, so foreign. I think are there any really bad foreign horror films that you've seen? Or?
Oh, yeah.
that was.
I've attempted real hard to forget most of them. I got to tell you. When they're that bad, you have to purge your memory banks every once in a while.
Oh yeah, well I mean Mystery Science Theater.
Yeah.
If you're a fan, I mean they're all there.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
You know, there's always that.
I mean, some of the Turkish horror movies are certainly are quite bad, quite overacted, quite poorly shot, and stuff like that. Which is not to say that Turkey doesn't make some good films; they do, but some of the bad ones are among the worst I've seen.
Okay. With that, we're going to take a short break. We'll be right back.
Speaking. What do you want?
To dedicate a murder to you.
Somebody called for you.
Yeah, who?
A guy with a strange voice. Said he'd call you back. He sounded just like a duck.
Just like a duck.
The guy who attacked her is our friend who calls and talks like a duck. Well, he's made his first big mistake.
Yeah. Anyway, we've got all 5 boroughs alerted, and we'll also inform all the radio stations. Shouldn't be too hard to find a guy missing 2 fingers in his right hand.
Poor dumb cop. You don't think I'd be so hours to let you pinpoint me with your stupid tracing machines, do you?
You give me all the data and we'll wait till the next victim.
So you think he'll do it again?
Oh, yes.
The second review is again from my zombie movie rating guide. It's a film called The Defiled from 2010. Every once in a while, a film comes along that is so bewildering it makes me wonder if there was an actual script involved, or whether it was totally improvised on set. This is one of those films. It must be a zombie film. It was part of a 2-disc set called Zombie Horror Fright Fest. Among the causes for my bewilderment were: Number 1, watching a zombie family unit forage for food. Number 2, watching a zombie drink from a creek. Number 3, zombies fucking. Number 4, a zombie finds a bottle of liquor, he puts it into his pocket of his suit jacket, and he drinks it later. Number 5, zombies using weapons. Number 6, a zombie eating chocolate. This doesn't even begin to cover the lack of internal logic found here. This black and white film evolves around a male zombie who accidentally kills his family by feeding them irradiated human meat. Before his pregnant wife dies, he uses a butcher's hook to perform a drastic cesarean section. The resulting infant, who is actually billed in the credits as Roger, is a totally unrealistic prop baby. The zombie dad cares for his infant on his own until he runs into a gang of redneck zombies who have captured 2 human women to torment and consume. He rescues one of the women, who then spends the rest of the film carrying the baby as they walk through various locales together. And that's really it until the climax. They walk, he falls down, he gets back up, they walk some more. Oh, and did I mention that there is no dialogue in the movie? The principals grunt and growl to convey the gist of what's happening. Not a bad idea if the actors were capable of conveying the story through their craft, but such is not the case here. The woman who portrays, for lack of a better term, the baby carrier, is particularly bad. Her face pretty much is expressionless through the whole film. And apparently Julian Grant, the director, failed to notice this in the dailies. So that, in a nutshell, is what this film is about. For 100 minutes, By the time it reached its predictable conclusion, I was ready for a shower to scour away the taint. There's really not much more I'd care to say. There's no nudity. There are some gory flesh-eating scenes and a body torn in half, but I suspected that one of the reasons that the film is presented in black and white is to help hide the shittiness of the effects and prosthetics. There is also a random scene of two birds flying across the screen, which inexplicably is done with CGI. They couldn't find stock footage of two birds flying. I decided to check out the IMDb after the screening, as is my wont, and the brief synopsis found there provided nary an iota of clarity for what I had just witnessed. Here's what it said. In a post-hypnotic world, science and technology have backfired, leaving unfathomable destruction and a permanently diseased planet in its wake. A virus is mutating the human race, turning innocent survivors into mindless cannibals. So they aren't really zombies, they're infected. Mindless cannibals? They aren't mindless, they act with motivation, use weapons, and have the desire to care for their young. Why then, as is implied, so many people immune? This film is a confusing, boring fucking mess. Watch this if you must, but I would suggest doing something more fruitful with your time, like spending it in a dentist chair or rearranging your sock drawer. And we're back. Hi, guys.
Hey.
Okay, so we do have another question.
All right.
And this one comes to us from Cecil in Kelowna. How do you differentiate between horror and science fiction cinema? Where does one end and the other begin?
Whew. That's a tough question.
I think the lines have blurred. They've been blurred for a long time. You know, with Alien.
That was the first thing that popped into my mind was Alien.
Yeah. But there are so many other crossovers to that effect of, you know, It, the thing from space, which was based on Alien. Alien was based on that. You know, there are so many. The creature in the confined space. You might be feeling The Descent.
Yeah.
Film.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Then you're dealing with caves and
You're dealing with spelunking.
yes, spelunking. Yes.
And, the first horror spelunking film.
When you said spelunking, I
super
kept thinking, it just popped into my skull about the professor from Gilligan's Island saying, say that again. Spelunking. Salicylic acid. Say something science again. In this anti-science world, when people are turning away from things like injections, you know, something like that is not really, you know, is kind of funny because people don't take science seriously now, in some cases.
Yeah.
Which may be a nice little segue when we were talking about science fiction into the mad scientist and the creatures that they create.
Well, even back in the 50s with the alien invasion films.
Yes.
You're dealing with, you know, science fiction, but it's also horrifying.
Atomic energy, the desert.
But yeah, but I mean, even by your example there, I mean, if we look back to, you know, probably the most iconic version of that, which is Frankenstein, is that in fact science fiction? Does it have some roots in science fiction?
Science fiction is considered ramifications of what science is and where it may be going.
Yeah.
And what, you know, the consequences of that.
I think it was called a science romance at one point, Frankenstein, the Mary Shelley novel. But it's an intriguing thing. I think that they're blurred. I think the lines of demarcation.
Very.
You were speaking about your preference to gore. There's a lot of gore in the monsters in the dark and in the light.
Yeah.
There's a lot more opportunity for that.
Yeah.
And perhaps that genre is flourishing now because we've gone away from the mythical creatures.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And those are kind of the new mythical creatures now, like aliens and alien life and all that kind of thing. That's kind of become the mythical creatures now. They're because we've debunked the idea of vampires and werewolves and all that kind of stuff, but we haven't been able to debunk anything about alien life, for example. right? Whether it ranges from John Carpenter's The Thing to Slither or
Frogs.
Night of the Creeps.
Frogs.
Frogs. Hey, Sam Elliott was in Frogs.
Oh, a Ray Milland film.
Squirm, a Canadian film.
Squirm, yeah.
Squirm.
Yeah. Slugs.
And
I just picked that up on DVD the other day.
And one that I actually have on my PVR, Cronenberg's Rabbit.
Mm-hmm.
Rabbit.
Yes.
Marilyn Chambers.
Yes,
Yeah.
in the Toronto subway.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, even speaking of Cronenberg, like Scanners
Yeah.
is potentially science fiction. as
Well, it was the drug that they injected them with.
Yeah.
Basically like a thalidomide type drug.
Yeah.
Creating the scanners.
Yeah. I think one of the big things about science fiction is that exploration of the unknown, right? Mm-hmm. And that's one of the key facets to horror films as well, or horror genre in general, is that exploration of the unknown and how that unknown can bite us in the ass, right? And so I think that they are a natural pairing together because they kind of exploit the same issues.
Mm-hmm.
There's that other Cronenberg picture too, you guys who were alluding to, Videodrome.
Videodrome, yeah.
Very much technological horror.
Those pictures, the technical ones, and you make the familiar device, which is now a television set, into an object of dread.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm waiting for when they do like a stapler or a pencil or something. Pencils from hell. Stylus from hell. You have to say stylus from hell.
Stylus from hell.
I'm writing this down.
Okay.
Hollywood is calling. Could you pick up on line 1? It's Hollywood.
Hello, Holly. No, the science, again, why don't we can talk about something like genetically modified food, which scares a lot of people now. Some people get frightened from hothouse tomatoes. Big things like this. They're not natural.
The stuff.
Or didn't they do a marketing for Heinz did marketing for green ketchup and it didn't work?
Yeah. That's right. Yeah.
You can't modify it. So.
Attack of the genetically modified killer tomatoes.
Oh wait, I hear the phone. I hear the phone.
Sure as shit, I just gave away another great idea.
Somebody just wrote it down.
I think one of the interesting things about horror is how easily and readily it pairs with so many other genres. Mm-hmm. It pairs beautifully with comedy. It pairs beautifully with sci-fi. It can even pair with romance, right? Mm-hmm. Something like Warm Bodies. If that's your bent, right? I didn't care for it, but some people did, right? And so you get all these different genres that horror can pair with that a lot of other genres can't compete with, right? Like you can't, war films, say for example, don't necessarily pair with every other kind of genre very well, but a horror war film can be done and has been done. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? So I find that that's a fascinating thing about horror. And why you get so many blurred lines between a lot of these genres.
Well, I think you would actually have to consider that the first 30 minutes of Saving Private Ryan is a horror film.
That argument could easily be made, yeah. Mm-hmm. It is certainly horrific.
It certainly is. Well, if it's horrific, then it's horrifying, and it's a horror film.
Yeah.
You're thinking of romantic. I kept thinking of George Hamilton and Susan St. James and
we didn't cover that one.
What a crying shame.
Yes. Some people will say that's silly, but the lines about Nadia Comaneci and when they were dancing, I love the nightlife.
I've almost was fully able to actually wipe that from my memory banks.
You got to do that sometimes.
And Arnie Johnson's great lines, Are you going to eat your lunch? No, my lunch is going to eat you.
Classic Artie. But no, you look at movies like Dark Matter, Event Horizon, things like that. I mean, you could argue they're horror films. You know?
I think unquestionably Event Horizon is.
Mhm.
I think it's merely the setting of Event Horizon that even brings it into sci-fi territory.
Yeah.
I think if that movie just took place in a house instead of on a spaceship, it would be pure horror.
They might have done that. People might have said, "Well, we've got this. Let's move it make it into a science fiction picture."
Yeah, yeah.
You know, well then, what about one of my favorites, Planet of Vampires, the old Italian picture.
Yep.
You know, and use of slow mo, little rocket ships with sparklers, but and it got the job done.
Yeah.
So.
I was going to say too that as far back as science fiction series goes, there were episodes of Lost in Space, Star Trek, that were geared towards horror as well.
Sure.
You got the Salt Vampire, things like that. Oh, you're smiling.
I think
I was going to say something. I'm not going to.
I think even recently you get something like Black Mirror that is garnering a lot of attention and stuff like that. And while it's maybe not full on horror, it's certainly Twilight Zone levels of horror. So I mean, again, and I think that one skews a little more towards the sci-fi than the horror, but there's still that blurred line in there, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I think anything that puts man in jeopardy in the future would have to be almost considered,
Right. Yeah.
Well, that's one of the aspects of horror that I brought up before, is the alteration of the human form.
Body horror
is a theme in any terror tale, for that matter, and science fiction perhaps offers more of a different take on the changing of the human form, where you become frozen or you become like an alien or you become a repository for things, as opposed to a mythical creature that will alter you into one of itself, or a victim, or into a state of death.
Immediately jumped there for some reason to David Cronenberg's The Fly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And again, science fiction as well.
Altered states.
Altered States.
Yeah. I mean, I think that there is an opportunity to be pure horror, and there's an opportunity to be pure sci-fi, especially if you're high concept sci-fi. But I'm not. I feel like those two cross over each other's paths way more than we often even realize.
What about Gojira? Where do we put that? They
Well,
always
I mean-
write it up in horror magazines and
Well, I mean,
Born out of the atomic age, right?
yeah, and because of the atomic age, you get Rodan and you get Mothra and yeah. Yeah, well, but no, yeah, I mean, it's at its very essence, it's science. Mechagodzilla. Yes. Well, yeah. Well, he'd be a scientific construct, wouldn't he?
Yes.
But I mean, even if you look at things like, light sci-fi, like The Hunger Games or The Maze Runner or Ender's Game or something like that, if you really want to see them, there are horrific aspects in there, right?
Mm-hmm.
The Hunger Games are these children being pitted against it. It's kind of a battle royale without having the teeth of battle royale, right? But there's still, and while none of the movies or even the books play up that aspect of it, of the horrific aspect of it, if you wanted to look for it, it's right there, and it's quite plain, right? So even in works that don't attempt to highlight the horrific aspect, they're still there, right? And so I think that it makes this line so blurred.
It's true. And if we talk about man's inhumanity to man, or man's, would we classify Blade Runner as a horror film? It would be for the replicants.
Blade Runner's
It's pure. I mean, it's pure science fiction.
Blade Runner. neo-noir,
Yeah.
which is a
Sure.
whole huge genre in itself. They don't call
But I
it
mean,
film
again,
noir.
if you want to boil it right down and pick it right apart, you've got these replicants coming in, replacing human beings, walking among us, undetected, right? Like, say, a vampire or a werewolf walking among us undetected. And yeah, and Jim raises a very good point. From the point of view of the replicants, that's a horror movie. I mean, you know, Harrison Ford is stalking them and killing them.
Yeah, that's true. You're killing something that's supposedly not human, and you've created it in your image.
Mm-hmm.
But there's an incredible. I'll go back to the pathos and the humanity to those, particularly in the first film with Roy Batty at the end. Time to die. Speech. I think it's a little different.
Supposedly improv.
Yeah. It was. Was it?
Yeah, that's what I've heard.
Yeah. It's written as a detective. They class it as neo-noir for some reason, but there are
For obvious reasons, I think. You know, and I don't want to take away from that.
Yeah, it's not film noir because they consider film noir gone, and it's now neo-noir. You know, there are some intriguing aspects to it. I wouldn't call it a horror picture.
No.
So.
Well, just, you know, science fiction with horrifying aspects. Film comes to mind, Ex Machina.
Yeah.
Well, you're dealing everything too with what we said before about it being the alteration of the human form.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which seems to be a central theme.
Well, I think that's all the time we have for this evening. I'd like to thank Keith Kollee for joining us this evening, and I hope you can come back again one of these days.
Love to.
You guys will have an episode coming up soon. What holidays are coming up?
The weekend.
Yeah, this was shot just after Ukrainian Christmas, so we were going to discuss our favorite Ukrainian Christmas horror films, but
we're out of time?
We're out of time.
Oh, damn it, Jim. Damn it. You made promises to me.
It was green eggs and ham. Hey, don't laugh. This is a sidelight when they talk about stories, the early fairy tales. Very horrific. You're getting people being stuck in ovens.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
You know?
Chopped into pieces.
Well, Grimm's fairy tales, we're not, you know, it's not, you're not going to read it to your kid before bedtime.
Cutting tails off rats and things. All these things. That's a whole
nother episode.
That's a whole nother episode.
Thank you for joining us this evening.
Yes.
We'll be back soon. Cheers.
With your